Hi people, Titus here again for a tutorial on working with user interfaces in Unreal Engine. In this tutorial we'll go through creating several custom blueprint widgets, add animation layers, and drive the behavior of drawing the widgets to the viewport through several blueprint types. This is going to be a bit of a long one, so let's go ahead and jump right in and set up our project. For this one I'm going to be using the third-person template. Make sure you have the starter content checked, give a name and choose a location, and then create your project. So there's a few different ways to handle widgets. In this one I'm going to show you basically creating a different widget blueprint for each kind of like screen. So we'll have one for our splash screen, we'll do one for our main menu, we'll do one for our HUD, game over, and a credit screen. But what some people will do is they'll create a single widget and then they'll just add layers inside that single widget and actually basically add or remove layers on the fly. So you can kind of do it either way. I think it's just easier to understand when you separate them out though. But starting, let's go ahead and set up our folders. We're going to have quite a few. The first one we're going to do is a widgets folder. And then I'm also going to have an audio folder. I'm going to have a fonts folder because I'm going to be using some fonts that I downloaded from the web to add a little bit of class to the project. I also downloaded some logos. We'll do some visual effects. And we will of course have levels, but we're only making one level. And then our blueprints folder for our custom blueprints that we're going to be making. So these are the folders that I made. Let's set up the outline for this project. So we're going to be creating 5 widgets. So you can just go into user interface and then widget blueprint and then choose user widget. I like to give it the designation WB for widget blueprint and then underscore and then give it a name. So this one we'll call splash screen. And then the next one we'll call credits. And then WB underscore main menu. And then we got to do a HUD, heads up display. And last one we'll do is our game over state. Alright, so in order of when you'll typically see these, you'll usually see your splash screen first. Typically loads into a main menu. And then if depending on what you choose from the main menu, you'll see credits or the HUD. And then you'll get a game over state if you die. So I'll kind of show you how to set up and design these. And then also drive the logic behind them through blueprints. So let's first do the splash screen. Let's go ahead and dock this in here. Pretty much every single widget that you set up or design is going to have a canvas panel. So you can just search for that and drag it in. That'll probably be the same everywhere. For my splash screen, I'm actually just going to make it a black drop or backdrop. So I'm just going to drag in an image, go into anchors, select the full screen anchor. So it moves my anchors in position. And I can go back to anchors and just hold Control and click full screen, and it'll expand out my image. And then I can go to the color, just set it to black, and then click OK. Now I'm going to need some text. The text I'm going to anchor center, and that moves my anchor center. So then I'll go back to anchors and hold Control. Kind of puts it a little bit offset, so I'll go back and hold Shift. And it's going to center it perfectly. If you go into font and you change the size, you're going to notice that it messes with the centering. Just check the size to content and it'll keep it centered for you. This is going to be the title of our game, so just call it My Epic Game, or whatever you want to call it. And the I want to use a custom font, and you see there's none in here. So what we can do is go back to our fonts folder, and I downloaded some from the web. Unreal Engine selects OTF and TTF file types. So I got a few of those here. And then I should just be able to drag and drop and just choose yes to all. And I'm going to get that for each file type, so 2 times. There they are. Now if I go back to my splash screen, there's all my different fonts. And I like this one here, ethnocentric, so I'm going to try that one. I don't like it right in the center. I need a little bit of room for my images, so I think I'm going to move this up a little bit. It's maybe negative 265. So we'll do that. I'm going to be doing a couple partner logos, and I'm going to space them dynamically. So I'm going to use a horizontal box to do that. So I can drag that out here. Anchor that to the bottom of the screen. Go back to anchors. I'm going to try holding shift, which that didn't work, so I have to hold control first. And then that does that correctly there. I'm then going to drag it up, and it's going to take a pretty good chunk of the screen there. I'm going to add some left and right offset. I'm going to do 50 on the left and 50 on the right. And then for the Y, I'll do negative 40. So I'm going to be placing my images kind of just inside this box. And let's import our images next. So let's go to our logos folder. And under third party, let's grab a couple of these here, drag them in. Pretty straightforward. And then go back to our splash screen. I'm going to add 4 images, and I'm going to put them in the horizontal box so they get nested. So it's important that you add them over here so they get nested inside your, your actual container. So we'll do 4 of them, which I missed that one, you noticed. So you can drag and drop and bring it over. Now in each of the image, I'm just going to go into it, and under the brush, there's an image type. I'm just going to set the images first. It's way too big, so I'm going to maybe lower that to 500. The Y value doesn't matter because it's set to the container, so if I try to change it, you see nothing happens, so you don't have to worry about that. But you probably will want to rename the title, because what we're going to do is we're going to animate this, and it's going to be easier to find if you actually use a good naming convention. For the second one, we'll do maybe speed tree. Let's try 400. Speed tree. All right, and then for this one, I always forget the name of this one. Simply Gone. I think they do optimization of your meshes. I'm just going to leave that standard. It's good enough. Simply Gone. All right, and then our last one, but certainly not least, that's going to be our Unreal logo. It's way too big. I'm going to change that to 300. And then I'm going to give the tag of Unreal so I can tell it apart. Now to space them, you can actually search your panel for something called spacer. And then you can drag in spacers inside your horizontal box. And then you just put them in between the items you need a space for. So I think I'm going to try padding of 50 for that one. 50 for that one. That one already kind of has a space because of the image, so maybe I'm going to do 25 on that one. And then, yeah, that looks pretty good. So we pretty much have the design set for our splash screen. Let's go ahead and set up an animation. You can click animation down here, And then I'm simply going to dock it in the layer. Add a new animation, we'll call it anim_splash. And then I'm gonna only animate these 4 images. I'm gonna leave everything else alone. So we gotta add a track for each of the items. So I'm gonna choose Blender, Simply Gone, Speed Tree, and Unreal. Now in each of the items we can animate a few different properties. The one I'm gonna do is render opacity. So you can do like transform, you can turn it off and on, you can change the opacity, which is kind of how you fade it in and out, you know, all sorts of things. So do render opacity on each one. All right, and then on frame 0, I want everything to not be visible. And then on frame 0.25, I still want everything to not show. So I'm gonna add a keyframe for that. At half a second, I'm gonna go ahead and render in Blender, but I'm gonna leave everything else as unrendered. And then at 3/4 of a second, I'm gonna keep everything the same. And then at exactly 1 second, I'm gonna bring in the speed tree, which is the second item in the row. So there's speed tree there. And then I'll add a keyframe for everything else. And then at 1 1/4, I'm gonna keyframe everything the same so we don't see any. So there's basically, the reason I'm doing that is so there's a pause in between each fade in. Otherwise it'll, you'll see them kind of overlap, which maybe that's what you want. I mean, it doesn't matter. And then at 1.5 seconds, I'm gonna go ahead and fade in the Simply Gone. And then I'll keyframe everything else. And then at 1 3/4, keep everything the same. And then at 2 seconds, I'll fade in Unreal, keyframe everything else. And then I'll continue the screen till about 3 seconds, I think. And that'll complete my animation. So as we scrub through this, you'll see each item pops in. And then it waits a second, and then we'll cut it off at 3 seconds. All right, so that's the animation and the design. Now we have to drive the actual logic. So under the construction, we can just simply play animation. We can expand out our animation variables and grab our anim splash, do a get, and then plug in the animation here. And when you're drawing widgets, it's going to be the same type of setup. So you're going to drag off and you're going to first do a delay because we want to wait. So we're going to wait the 3 seconds. And then we're going to create a widget. We're going to do the main menu widget. We're going to add it to viewport. And because our splash screen is drawn, we need to remove that. And we can do that with remove from parent. And the target referencing self, referencing the splash screen, so we don't have to plug anything in. And that should complete our code for this one. So the splash screen will get called from somewhere else. When it gets called, it plays this animation. It waits 3 seconds. And then it creates the main menu and it removes the splash screen. So pretty straightforward. But now we need to actually create our second widget, which is going to be our main menu. Now most widgets, especially with the tutorials that I see online, they're kind of like they're 2D widgets. So they're basically like done in Photoshop, and they look really good. But you don't always have to do 2D widgets. You can do like 3D widgets. So when we do the main menu, I'll show you an example of like a third or a 3D widget that you can do. So we'll create a level, and we'll add some visual effects, and then we'll do a transparent canvas, and then we'll kind of use the game itself as part of the menu system. So let's first create a new level. We'll do a basic level. Let's go ahead and save current level as main menu. And I am going to create a new blueprint class. I'm going to use a pawn. Call it b_pawn just for simplicity. We'll dock that in here. And we're going to add a skeletal mesh. I'm going to call the mesh Manny. And I'm going to drag this out. And I'm going to use the SK mannequin. So right there. And maybe to make him a little bit different, I'll switch up his material slot to water. That looks pretty cool. And then we can just simply go to a part of the map. I don't know, like right around here, it looks fine. Drag out Manny. And then we can rotate him around. Move him maybe right around there. Now we need to add in a camera component. So we'll go to our quick add option, and under all classes, there's a camera actor. So we can drag that out here. And yeah, that looks pretty good. There's an issue when I hit play. It's going to spawn me into my third person character. So we need to fix that, and we can do that in the level blueprint. So we'll just click the blueprint, open level blueprint. And under the event begin play, we can drag off that and do a set view target with a blend. If you don't see it, just uncheck the context sensitive, and it's right there. Now, it's going to blend from the player controller, which we will need to get a reference to. So we drag off, get player controller, and then we need a new target. The target we're going to use is the camera. So just make sure the camera is highlighted in the world. And then under the level blueprint editor, you can right click, check the context sensitive, and then you'll see the create reference to camera actor. And then you can just plug that in there. Now, because the blend time is 0, it's gonna snap. Oh, not controller, I'm sorry, character. So let's do get player state self. No, that should be right, hang on. Get player, it should be player controller. Maybe I got the wrong one. Yeah, I didn't see it. I must have got the wrong one. So maybe don't get player. No, it should have been, I guess I didn't see it. Maybe I selected the wrong one. But yeah, make sure it's player controller index 0, and it should compile. But when we play the level, you see it snaps right to it. Now, if you're looking for something, maybe a little bit cinematic, you could probably play with the blend time. So maybe do like 5 seconds, and then you'll get like a little bit of a camera movement. So maybe that's what you're going for. So you can do something like that. For this tutorial, I'm actually just going to have it snap directly in, and I'm going to do some visual effects. So I'll keep it a little bit simpler. But there is another issue. When we played, you notice the third person character still being created, and sometimes it draws it in front of the screen, so it's kind of a little bit of an issue. You can go to your project settings, and under the maps and modes, just change the game mode from third person to game mode base. And then I'm also going to switch the default editor map to be the main menu, and that should take care of that. So no more third person character gets created. All right. So now we need to set up the lighting. So let's select the directional light, and then click into your pie menu. And if you hold Control-Alt-L, you can move the sun and kind of maybe get an interesting light effect that you're trying to go for. Yeah, so maybe something like that. So we can start off with that and see how it looks. But then I'm also going to add a visual effect. Well, actually before that, let's actually get Manny moving here. So let's give him an animation state. To do that, we have to create an animation blueprint. And we'll select his skeleton. We'll call it AB_pawn, just for simplicity. And I think I only have the default. Yeah, he's only got one animation, so jog. So we'll drag that in here. Hook up the sequence. It's going a little too quick, so I'm going to double click the sequence. And under the rate scale, I'll slow him down to a 0.3. And that's more of the effect I'm looking for. So I can save that. Go into the pawn blueprint again. And under the animation class, just select your new AB_pawn. There's going to be an issue with it though. So when we hit play, it's kind of doing what I want, but he's not going to loop. So you notice he should just kind of stop. So let's go back into the animation blueprint, and at the bottom, there's a loop animation. So just check that, compile and save. And then you shouldn't have any issues with his run cycle, so it should just continue forward. So now what I'll do is I'll maybe black out the ground, and I'll maybe add a particle system to give the illusion of movement. Another thing you might be able to do is you might actually be able to affect his transform and attach the camera to him and maybe add some camera shake. So you can do a few different interesting effects here, but I'm going to go the particle effect route. So let's go to our VFX folder. We'll right click and create a Niagara system. I'm going to use the template, and blowing particles would actually work really good. So would the hanging particulates actually. So I'll probably, yeah, I'm going to do particulates. Call it NS_ main menu. And under the initialized particles, I'm going to make them green. I'm going to do a 1 in 30 for the lifetime. And then I'm going to mess with the wind force. I want to give the illusion of movement, so I'm going to, rather than move Manny, I'm just going to move these particles. And I don't know if it's going to be in the X and the Y, and it might be a positive or a negative value. So you kind of got to, we're going to set it, and then we'll drop it in the world, and we'll kind of tune it. So let's do 20 starting off. And I can't tell which direction they're moving because of the curl noise, so I'm just going to turn that off for now. And then I am going to just simply drag this in. Oh, it gives us an arrow. Okay, I think we'll be okay. So okay, yeah, so that should work fine. So then if your particles are going the wrong direction, you can simply rotate the Niagara system when you put it in there, or you can go into here and actually change it from X to Y, or change it from a positive to a negative value in either the X or the Y. And it should give you the effect you're looking for. But let's add the curl back in. I am going to reduce it though. I think 4 is a little bit too much. I'm going to do 1. Especially for like trying to get the illusion of movement. And yeah, that's looking a little bit more what I'm trying to go for. But yeah, so we'll have him kind of running, and maybe we'll blur the background too. And then we'll just draw our a transparent widget on the right side, and we'll give the player the option to play the game, or play credits, or quit the game. So pretty straightforward. But yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. All right, so let's head back into our widgets. And in order to drive the logic, There's a lot of different ways you can do it. We could take the approach from the level blueprint, but I think since Manny's already in the scene, we can drive it off him. So in his pawn component, let's go to the event graph, and on begin play, we can do create widget. We'll call the splash screen, and from there we will add to viewport, connect the output to input pins. And I don't think we have to remove from parent because, yeah, I don't think because there's nothing on the screen yet. So I think we should be okay with just that. So this will call the splash screen, and then the splash screen has the code to call the main menu. So let's actually design the main menu real quick. So we got the main menu open. Same thing, we're gonna add in a canvas panel. And for this one, I am also going to add a image, but I'm going to anchor it to the right side of the screen. I'm going to hold Control. I'm going to go back and hold Shift, and then I'm going to expand it out pretty far. And now I'm going to use what's called a vertical box. So kind of like the horizontal box, we're going to use that to align our buttons. So instead of images align, we're going to be aligning buttons, and you'll see that here in a second. So drag that in, anchor that to the right, hold Control, and then hold Shift. And then drag and make sure it matches the image, like that. And then I'm going to add a button and nest it in the vertical box, and then I'm going to add text and nest it on the button. And then I'll duplicate the button twice to make it easy. So the first button we're going to call is our play button. For the style, I want the normal to be set as none for the draw type, and that'll make it transparent. Also for the image, before I forget, let's go to the color or the tint. Set the opacity or the alpha to be 0.3, because I am going to forget that. And there we go. So the button's going to be translucent, but the hover state and the press state are still going to be colored. So you're going to see, so when you hover over it and you click it, it'll look a little different. You can play with the effect, whatever you're going for, but I find that, you know, that looks pretty good. And then on the text, let's call this just play. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to use the same font, which was ethnocentric. And I'm going to do probably 72. I think that looks pretty good. If you want to know why I'm updating only the buttons title, it's because when we call that later in code, it's easier for us to see what it is. You can do both, it doesn't matter, but we're going to be only referencing the button in code, not the text. So that's the only reason why I'm doing it. So now that we have the button kind of how we like it, we can just right click on it, duplicate it twice, and then on the second button we'll call that credits, and then the text will say credits, and the third button will be our exit, and the text will say exit. And just like before, we'll use spacers, and we'll nest them inside the vertical box, and then we will move them appropriately. I'm going to collapse the buttons so it's easier. Alright, and then for the first spacer, I think I'll do 100. And then for each other spacer, I think I'll maybe do 50. Yeah, 50 looks okay. Maybe 25 would be better, but I'll try that for now. Okay, so now we have the design of the widget. And I think we already set the code. We haven't done any code in here yet, but I don't think we need to just yet. So let's see how this is looking. So we hit play. There's our splash screen, so that's working. And then we're loading into our main menu. Now none of the buttons do anything, and that's okay. But yeah, we're kind of getting there. So let's actually drive some logic now. I'm not going to use pre-construct, and I'm not going to use tick. I am going to use the construct event. So when this thing gets created, I want to play some main menu music. And normally I would just do play sound, but I need a way to be able to turn this off. So I'm going to do spawn sound instead. And when I do that, I can actually promote a variable, and we'll just call it like main music. And that'll give me an ability to toggle that on and off later on. The music I'm going to use is just part of the starter package. So there's, I think, starter music. And I'm going to change that to 0.1 on the volume multiplier because it's pretty loud. And that should at least get us some working main menu music. Like that. The next thing, we're gonna drive the logic behind the buttons. So the easiest way I found is if you simply just select the button, scroll down, there's an on-clicked event, you just hit the plus sign, go back to designer, and repeat that for the rest of your buttons. So go back to designer, last button, scroll down, on-clicked, hit the plus sign. So now we have 3 events for each of the button presses. The exit button's the easiest. You just call it out to quit game. Done. The credits button, that one's a little tricky. That one you have to create widget. We're of course going to be calling the credits widget, and then we have to add it to the viewport, hook up the output to input, and then we have to remove the parent because we have to remove the main menu widget so it can draw the so it doesn't draw it on top of it. And the reference to self is of course the reference to the main menu widget, so we don't need to put that in. The on-click play button, what I'm going to do is I'm just simply going to drag off and do a open level by name, and the third person map is just third person map. Case does matter, so third person map, that's part of the starter package, so that one should be on there if you had that checked when you're doing your project. If we compile and save, now our buttons should actually work. So if I push play, it loads me into the main game. If I push credits, it's just going to remove the screen because we haven't created the credit screen yet. And if I push quit, it should of course just quit the game, or exit I should say. So if you want to give a little bit more life to that, what you could do is you can drag out and, you know, play sound, do like an explosion or a gunshot or, you know, whatever. I'm gonna lower the volume to like 0.1, and then you can call out a delay, and we'll do a half-second delay. And we can copy those nodes and then drag out your execution pins. You can hold Alt and terminate a pin like that. Oh, I already did that one, so I didn't need to do the top one. And now you should get a little bit more a little more functionality to it. A little bit more life. If you're not happy with the main menu, like there's a lot of things you can do inside your actual map that can affect that. Like changing the lighting is probably, I find it to be the biggest one. So if we go back to the lighting and maybe do Control-Alt-L, whoops, you got to click into Pi. Control-Alt-L, and maybe let's do like a darker, like something like that. That gives you a much different vibe compared to what you had. You also changing the color scheme of your menus can help a lot too. So like if we go to our image, we can just set the color and opacity to maybe like a blue, but then like bring it real dark. And just little changes like that, and you got a completely different vibe. And like I was saying before, if you were to like actually animate his transform and attach the camera rig to Manny himself, the camera will move, and because you attach it to the rig, it'll actually shake and jitter. And then you can maybe attach the particle effect on him as well, or something on a boom far away, so you're still getting, you know, this Niagara system going. So you can still create a pretty neat effect just doing all sorts of little minor things, but this is an example of basically like a 3D kind of widget, right? Rather versus the 2D widgets. So you got a lot of flexibility when it comes to widgets, and you can get a lot of different cool effects. But let's continue through the tutorial though. So right now we got our splash and our main menu. The next biggest one is probably going to be the credits. So we'll tackle that. The HUD and the game over are going to be fairly quick. So on the credits, it's going to be the same thing. We'll search for a canvas, create our canvas panel, and then I'm going to do an image. I'm going to anchor that to the full screen, so hold Control. The tint, I'm going to make black. I'm going to add text on the panel, anchor it center, and hold Control, and then hold Shift. Then because I'm going to be sizing the content differently, I'm going to check the size to content. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm not going to use center. I'm going to use full screen for the text as well. Like that. And then I'm going to justify the text center. Because we're actually going to animate the credit screen as well. I think we'll do a classic movie credit screen where text just rolls from the bottom to the top across a black backdrop. I think that will pretty much illustrate the point. For the text, I actually created some fake names for some game titles, which took a lot longer than you'd think it would. So we can just paste that in just to give you like a visual look of it. Let's change the font. I'm going to use Zekton because I think that looks pretty neat. And I'm probably going to do 32. All right, yeah, I like that. So, and yeah, that's going to be our basic design for the credits. So now let's just animate it. Let's actually give it a name of credits. Oops. Compile. And I'm going to dock my animation into the screen because it's going to be a little bit easier for me. And zoom out a little bit. So we'll create a new animation. We'll call it Anim Credits. And then we'll add a track for the credits text. And we're going to be animating the transform. With transform, you got shear, scale, rotation, translation. We are, of course, doing translation. It gives you your X and Y. We are only modifying the up and down, which is the Y. So let's go ahead and figure out the first position, which is right there. I'm going to do, let's try 1100. That looks good. hit the plus sign to key it in. If you don't see the keyframe, simply collapse transform and it should show up. Now for the credit screen, I'm going to do this to music. So let's, I gotta import the music that I'm doing. So under audio, I am gonna be using this credits music that not really credits music, it's just like just a song that I think was on one of my computers. Unreal Engine only supports WAV files, so I had to convert it. So you may need to do that as well. There's plenty of online converters that can do it for you if you have a particular song in mind. It is important that whatever song you figure out you want to use, you got to get the length of the song, and I'll show you why. So the song I chose is 187 seconds long. So I need to go to that timeline. And you can see these are in small increments, so it'd take me forever to scroll right. But this little orange timer here, you can just click on it and you can type in your time and it'll just move you right there. So I'm just going to be entering 2 keyframes, one at frame or time 0 and the other one at the end of the song at 187 seconds. And I'm going to modify the transform to be at the top like that. So I'm going to do negative 6,000. And yeah, that's pretty good. So now if I scrub, you can see the animation's pretty basic, but it works. So compile and save. Now there's an issue with this animation, and I'll show you how to fix that in a second, but let's actually drive it. So under the construction event, we will again play an animation, and we will get our animation, plug it in, and then we have to set a delay. Actually, before the delay, we want to play sound. And the sound we want to play is our credits music. And then we want to wait 187 seconds. And then we are, of course, going to create widget. And I'm going to bring this back over to main menu. And then once we do main menu, we need to add to viewport, plug in our output to input. And for this, we also need to remove from parent. So basically draw the main menu, add it to the viewport, delete the credits widget. So there's 2 issues with our credits screen that you'll see here. Well, hopefully you'll see it. And it kind of harkens back to, one of them harkens back to this. But let's go ahead and play it so you can kind of see how it looks. Credits. Okay, so the 2 issues. The first one is obviously the text took way too long to actually show up. And number 2 is we had sound playing on top of sound. The other thing too, I guess there was a third one. That sound was entirely too loud, so I'm going to reduce it to 0.2. But yeah, let's fix the audio issue. So the audio issue is because the main menu song is still playing or looping. So when we click credits, after the delay, what we want to do is get a reference to main music. So drag out main music and do a get. Drag off and do a toggle active. Then we can hold Alt and break this connection and connect up these execution pins like so. That'll fix the audio playing on top of audio because we had 2 different soundtracks going at the same time. So to fix the other issue where the the text took entirely too long. If we go back to our animation and select the animation over here, whoops. You have a graph editor. You can click on that, and then you can click on your element that you animated, and you can see it's not a constant speed. So it goes very slow in the beginning, and then it speeds up, and then it goes slow at the end. So if we select our endpoints, we can change it to linear interpolation. And that should fix the speed portion of it. So then if we close out and hit play, and then we can hit credits. I forgot to compile and save because that's still taking a while. All right, yeah, let's go back. Animations. Oh, wait, no, I accidentally... did we create multiple? I don't know what this one is. Transform scale. I added an extra thing in there, so let's delete that. How the heck did I do that? Those. So we should be just doing the transform. So let's see. Go back into our graph editor. Oh, that's our X. Okay. I'm just reading that wrong. Looks okay. So let's save, compile. Let's try that again. There we go. I guess it was just, I must have had something in one of the other fields, but you can see it's playing at a constant speed now, and it's a little bit quicker. Well, it's a lot quicker. Yeah, it's a very quick and easy credit screen, and at the end of the credit screen, it'll pull it off and load back into the main menu. So. Pretty basic. So now let's do our HUD. Now for the HUD, that one's going to be very easy because it's just going to be a canvas panel, and it's just going to be a progress bar. I'm going to anchor that top left, so hold Control, and then I'm going to give some offsets of 50 and 25, and this is just going to be my life bar basically. Now, for the life bar, I did some 2D PNGs that I created. Nothing real fancy. But we got to import those. So we go back to widgets. We got to have an empty and a fill bar. So I have two different types of fill bars that we can try. So on the progress bar, if you look under the style, you can expand that out, and you have a background and a fill. So the background will use the empty bar, but we need to draw it as an image. And then for the fill image, we can try the square, the little kind of like Mega Man one. And we can draw that as an image as well. And then when you update the percentage, you can see how it kind of shows up. The reason it has a tint is because fill color and opacity. Change these values to 1. And then it'll go back to your regular colors that you're used to. And if you don't like this style, I also have just the regular full one, so you can kind of pick whatever one you want. And that's basically the design of your HUD. I mean, depending on your game type, you know, this one's just a simple health bar, but you could have maybe an energy bar or a stamina bar. You know, you might have items, so you might have other things you need to add on here, but it's just showing you a simple HUD design and how to call it. So it's more the principle of the matter. Now in our main menu, we're not actually playing as Manny. When we play the game, we're playing as the third person character. So when we set up the logic for the health system, we have to drive that in the, well, you can drive it anywhere, but I'm going to do it directly in the character component or the character class, which in this case is going to be Quinn, the default third person character. So in the event graph here, we can grab off the event begin play and just do a create widget, and we'll do the HUD, and then we'll do add to viewport, toggle the output into the input, and because it's a new level, I won't have to remove from parent, even though there is a widget already on the screen. And I'll kind of show you that here. So we hit play, that's the splash widget, it gets pulled off. That's the main menu widget, we hit play. I did not pull off the main menu widget, but because we loaded a new level, new widgets, so I didn't need to do that. But yeah, so now we have our character with their HUD screen. So now we need to drive the logic to control the health system, which we don't have a health system on this blueprint. It didn't include one. So let's create a variable and we'll call it health. The data type has to be a float. And if you compile it, you'll have access to set the value on the bottom right. Most people will set a value of 100. I am going to set a value of 1. The reason I'm doing that is for simplicity. The progress bars, they only accept values of between 0 and 1. So if you were doing health at 100, you would have to divide that value by 100 in order to feed it to the health system in the HUD. Because if you had a value of 100 and you went down to 60 and you gave the HUD system 60 health, it's going to draw it like this because 60 is more than 1. So you'd have to divide 60 by 100, which would give you 0.6, and then it would look correct. But just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to do it this way. So now I can call out an event to, well, actually, before I do that, if we go back into the HUD system, next to the percentage, there's a bind. So we can create a binding. And then you can drag off the initial node and do a cast to third person character or whatever character class you're using. And then as the third person character, I can drag off that and do health. And I can do a get health. Actually, before that, let me go back here and give it health system flag. That way it's kind of separated. And then when you drag back off, you'll see it's the health system now. So we'll get health. So if you did a value of 100, you'd have to drag off here, do some math, divide by 100, or maybe 1,000, depending on how much health whatever ranges you're doing, and feed it in. So it's basically feeding in a value between 0 and 1. Since I'm not, I can just simply drag in the value, and it's going to work pretty okay. Now I need a reference to the character, so I need to get player character. All right. So now if we load up the game here. Splash screen, play. So now you can see our health system is at 100% or a value of 1. Now we can't see if the logic is working. Key bindings are not exactly efficient. It's probably better to drive the logic, through events in like Blueprint, but it's easier to set up, so we're just going to do it that way. But let's create a way to actually do damage so we can actually see if it's working. So under blueprints, let's just create a simple blueprint class of an actor type. Call it b_damage_cube. And we will add a cube. And we will also add a collision box, call it trigger. Then the cube, we will, scale, and make it smaller. And then the trigger, we'll make the trigger bigger. And let's give it a pretty unique mesh so it's not so bland. And let's drag out the cube. All right, so the logic we'll drive is when we touch this thing, it'll do damage to us. And we'll use that using the box collision. And maybe we'll make it spin or something. So yeah, let's go into the damage cube and under the event graph, let's make it spin. So let's add a variable called rotation. I'm going to set it to, normally I'd do a vector because rotation has 3 values. But since I'm only going to be modifying the z-axis, I'm going to do it as a float. I don't have access to the value on the bottom right, so I have to hit compile. Now I do. I'm going to set it to 1 degree. And then I'm going to do a get rotation. And then I'm going to do a set rotation. I'm going to select the cube mesh. And then I'm going to drag off and do set relative rotation for the cube. Yeah, I guess that's fine. Now, if you notice, I can't plug in the rotation because it's not a vector, but you can right click and split it. And I only need to modify the z-axis, so I'll just plug it in there. So it's going to set it to 1 degree and rotate it 1 degree. But then I'm going to do some simple addition. I'm going to add 1 degree to its current value. Plug it into the set new rotation and execute that after the rotation has been set on the mesh for the damage cube. And that should give me some basic functionality to spin this thing. All right, so we got it moving. Fancy. Now let's have it do some damage to me. So on an overlap, I want to cast to third person character, just like we did before. Plug the output to the input. As the third person, I want to get the health. And then as the third person, I want to set the health. And now I need to do some simple math. After health, I'm going to subtract. And I'm going to do the damage in the form of values between 0 and 1. So I'm going to do 0.25. You could also promote this to a damage variable and set it in the details panel if that's easier. All right, we'll hook up our execution pins. And this thing should actually hurt me now. So there you go. So you can see we set up the logic in the widget correctly because it is referencing values from the third person character blueprint. But I don't have a game over state and I don't have a death state for my character. So we kind of need to, and I also probably want to destroy this thing. So we can do that easy enough. After we damage, we can maybe just play a sound, make an explosion. We'll do it 0.1 so it's not so loud. Then we'll spawn emitter at location. We'll get a reference to the cube. With our reference, we will then get world location. We can plug that into where to spawn the emitter. The emitter type, I'm gonna do an explosion. I'm gonna scale the size of the explosion to 5. And then I am going to destroy the actor and reference the self. Self in this instance is a reference to the damage cube blueprint. So it's basically going to destroy the cube and everything attached to the cube. So now it should look a little more like a game, right? All right, so now if we go into our actual level, we can hold Alt and drag off these. And we can create a few of them around the map. You'll notice that even though I have a way to do damage, I don't have a way to stop my character from moving or calling a game over widget. So we need to do, let's do the death state first, and then we'll do the game over state last. So in our third person character, what we'll want to do is we'll use tick, the event tick, because that is called every frame. We can simply get a reference to our health, and we can drag off that and say less equal. And if we say, is our health less than or equal to 0? If it is, we'll do a branch condition. We'll plug that value in here. So this will evaluate the true or false based on, if health is less than or equal to 0. If it is, we can set simulated physics on the mesh component to simulate. And that won't stop your movement, so you need to do that separately. So then you drag off that and do set movement on the character movement component, and you'd set it to none. Or, if you were enabling movement, you would set it to walking or whatever. And then that should give us, there's still another issue with it. It'll stop us from moving and it'll create a ragdoll effect. But I didn't set up collision correctly in this map, so I'm gonna probably fall through the map. Yeah, I fell through the map. But it stops me from moving, and I can't, I can't move around the map anymore. Collisions are kind of a complicated topic, so that's probably gonna be a different video. And this video is already long enough. What we can do to work around it is in our viewport, just select the mesh, search for collision, and change it from character mesh to pawn. I think we'll do it. Compile and save. And now we should get the ragdoll effect that you're probably used to. There you go. And then you notice I can't move. So now that we have a death state, we can then create our last widget, which is our game over state. So let's open that up. And just like before, we'll add a canvas. And then we will add an image. Anchor the image to full screen, hold Control. I'm gonna leave it white, just to be a little different this time. Add some text. I'm gonna anchor that text center, hold Control, then hold Shift. I'm then gonna size the content check. I'm gonna title it Game Over. I'm gonna give it a color of black. I'll size it up. And we're going to change it to match our other font type. Very basic game over design, but it's going to do the job. Let's go ahead and add an animation to it. One last animation example. We'll do anim game over. Now on this one, I'm actually going to do the track as a reference to this, which will do the entire widget. And I'm going to do that for two reasons. One, I don't want to bother removing the other one. It'll draw over it when I do it this way. And the other reason is just I'm literally going to be animating everything, so I might as well. The track I'm going to use is render opacity. At frame 0, I am going to basically be invisible. And then at 2 seconds, I'll be 1. And there's your animation. Let's drive the logic in Blueprint now. So we'll head over to the graph. On construction, play animation. Get a reference to our animation that we just set up there. Plug it in. And then what we can do is simply delay. We'll wait 3 seconds. And then under completed, we will then do open level by name. And we will just simply open main menu, which will restart our game essentially. Now if we go back to the third person character, under the event tick, when the health is 0, we gotta simulate the physics, set the movement mode. I'm gonna delay, and I'm gonna let them look at the body for about 2 seconds to realize what they did. And then we're going to do some similar code that you've seen many times. Create a widget. We'll do game over. And then we will add to viewport. Connect this. And at this point you would normally do remove from parent because we have a HUD. So the HUD would technically show up. And if you needed a reference, you could steal the HUD widget since it's in the same code and drag it over, or you could promote it to a variable and do it that way too. But actually, because I'm doing the other blueprint, the way I set it up, it's going to draw on top of the HUD. So I don't think that's going to be necessary, but we'll find out in a second. So let's go ahead and play the game. See if I can jump. Nope. So wait a couple seconds, game over, and you can see it covers the HUD, so just like I figured it would. So, you know, you could still remove it. I don't think it's going to hurt anything, but shouldn't be necessary. And then you got your credits, plays the music. So yeah, so you have a pretty well functioning game. So that, you know, that's a pretty good overview of widgets in Unreal Engine. I mean, most basic games, they have a splash screen, they have a main menu, they have a HUD, they have a credit screen, they have a game over screen. You know, as a challenge to you with everything you've seen, what you could do is try creating another widget blueprint. Call it WP_pause, and design a pause menu and drive the logic in the third person blueprint with a keyboard input P. So you can do this off the when the player presses the P key in game. Try to see if you can drive that logic. And if you need help, I actually did make a previous video that covered pause menus. It's a lot shorter than this video, so if you need help, you can reference that. But yeah, that'd be a good challenge for you, just to see if you can put what you learned to the actual test. And if you guys did stay with me to the end, I will give you another tip. Under our main menu level, Manny is running, and it kind of looks like he's holding a gun. So what we can do is we can actually, I can show you sockets, which is pretty cool actually. go here. And I'll just bring this into my level blueprint, that's fine. So Manny looks like he's kind of running, but he's got nothing in there. So if you had a character model and you wanted to add like an item, like, you know, maybe a gun or a flashlight or a wand or, yeah, what have you, the character meshes have the ability on the skeletons to have sockets created, and you can do that like even if you make the skeleton mesh like in Blender and you import it, you can still create the sockets. It's pretty neat. So I can select my taser rifle skeletal mesh, and if I go into the Manny pawn, I can select Manny and hit add, and it automatically does a skeletal reference to my taser rifle. So I can just select that. And on the right side, there's a parent socket. If you click on the little open field, you got weapon, right, left, and muzzle. So you can basically create sockets anywhere. Well, I don't think you can do it anywhere, but you could do it in the critical junctures. You know, like flashlights on the helmets for the heads, or weapons for the hands, what have you. So I can do right, and then if I select Manny and go to advanced, I can pause the animation, go back to my taser rifle, and I can actually dial in the transform here. So maybe go like that, drag it up, turn off snapping. Obviously this model wasn't made for him in mind, but you kind of get the idea. And then I can go back to Manny and unpause. And now when you go to your main menu, and the blur effect kind of, actually, did I ever add the blur? I don't think I did. No. But if you wanted to add a blur effect, we can go back to main menu, design, search blur, add a background blur. Let's scale that to the full screen. Let's give it a strength of maybe 1. Yeah, let's do 2. I think 2 looks good. We're going to set the Z order to be -1 so it doesn't cover our text. Compile and play. So you can use like a blur to hide any imperfections in your menu, and maybe that's an effect you're even just looking for. But yeah, a lot of different options with menu systems in Unreal. So this pretty much concludes this tutorial on user interface widgets in UE. So I hope you found it useful, and maybe it can help you in your own projects. If so, please leave a sub and a like, or feel free to send a comment on any future content you want covered on this channel. As always, thank you for watching, see you on the next one, and remember, while no success is true, try again. If dead, break.